going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm doing a brand new analysis today, and it's on one I am very optimistic about, one I'm very excited to talk about, and even one that I've made notes on because I don't want to necessarily forget everything in it because there's a lot going on in this particular novel, graphic novel, that is. And that is Alan Moore's critically acclaimed V for Vendetta. See, I have the DC Vertigo version, so there's a little bit more in the back. There's some, extra concept art and things in that nature. And I must say, just from the get-go, the art in this is absolutely amazing. I've heard polarizing opinions on it. I think it definitely fits what Alan Moore is going for. You can see it. There's a very noir aesthetic to it, and I think it fits perfectly. A lot of shadow shading, which I think also fits in with it, and I like the yellow contrast, especially right here. I'll show you the blue and yellow contrast here for V. I think looks absolutely amazing, and I like that you can't see his full face because the hat has the has the darkness over it and shadow. So I think that looks good, and I think it rhetorically says a lot about the deep and dark intricacies of this book. So a lot's happening in this, and I am also gonna say that the novel is the best, but the movie is also very good. And again, I've heard polarizing opinions on the movie, heard a lot of people don't like it. It's fine. I thought the movie was fantastic, but I think a lot of people will notice that the third portion of this, because this book is divided into three parts: part one, part two, and part three, obviously. I would say that the movie focuses more on the first two. I think focuses a lot on the first, but also the second part too. And then the third part, obviously, with the conclusion, it has to for the movie. Anyway, I think the movie was really good. The movie had a couple differences, but I think the movie did a really good job at getting that pathos effect that you really need in a story like this, one that's actually deeply political and deeply emotional, and is going to resonate with a lot of people who have undergone a lot of suppression and a lot of oppression in their lives. Alan Moore, to me, might be the greatest comic writer of all time, because he was able to take real life events and put them in a fictional setting, in a dystopian setting, and make them as realistic as he possibly could. And he does that in his prose and his diction, and he does that through a lot of phrases and a lot of tenses. And I think that really helps get the message across. Remember the 5th of November. And there's a lot of symbolism in Alan Moore's writing, especially in V for Vendetta. If you notice in this book, every chapter starts with a V. And almost everything has a V sound to it in its emphasis. V is obviously the main protagonist's name. And then there's Evie. And also, too, there's a lot of Roman numerals. There's a lot of symbolism that is going on in this book. And November 5th, number V, right? So there's a lot going on. And Alan Moore is really intricate in his symbolism. It's arguably his greatest attribute. And you have to really dig deep and critically think on his books, especially V for Vendetta. And I think that V remaining faceless, despite wearing a face, which is ironic and a paradox, tells you a lot, because society itself wears a mask a lot. It does. And society ends up portraying itself as something it's not. And I believe Alan Moore, sorry, I almost said Adam for some reason, but Alan Moore does this through fascism. And he tackles fascism and the negativity surrounding fascism. And I am going to be objective with this because this is a book, right? So, and that's the biggest problem that I think happens in a lot of analyses. And I see this in English all the time, where personal biases overtake the objectivity of what the story is telling. But I will say how Alan Moore portrays fascism is a good argument in the sense of finding a balance between control and anarchy. Because for V, anarchy isn't all about going all out with an all-out rebellion, even though this is a rebellion. It's about a controlled rebellion, and really finding reasons why you're doing what you're doing. So if you look at the beginning of the story with Northfire, who is this far right autocratic based entity within London that is trying to control everybody, and you can see with the Fingerman segment at the beginning with Evie, where they are trying to abduct her and assault her because she's unfortunately had to turn to prostitution. V saves the day right from the get-go, and I think that placement of having V save the day from the get-go already emotionally has the reader, and it gets them going, and it gets them wanting to see more of what V is about. So introducing him right at the beginning is an absolute genius move, and giving a semblance of tragedy and then heroism at the beginning really emphasizes, again, that emotional effect that you need to have with your reader. And it also happens in the movie too. The placement remains the same, which helps a lot. So I always have my notes with me just in case, but the one thing that I found interesting was the significance of the Shadow Gallery. And to me, because I'm a huge comic fan, it's almost like the Batcave, and it's almost like the Fortress of Solitude in a way, where this is the place where V kind of finds his zen, for lack of a better term. And I know that sounds ironic, but it's almost the place where he has his identity, and V's identity is within the Shadow Gallery, and we can see that when he introduces it to Evie and introduces his life and his music and his collections and what he has. And that's very revealing, because it shows a sense of not just anarchy on the outside, but anarchy on the inside, where V is not revealing to anybody but Evie, because he sees something within Evie that he sees in himself. And that's potentially a survivor, potentially somebody who he thinks can go against the proverbial status quo. And that is a big rhetorical message that I think society from any generation can look at today. And this book really reigns true in the present day. So when you think about masterpieces in literature, and you look at what they're doing, and you look at the prose, and you look at what the prose signifies, you got to ask yourself, when looking at a masterpiece and a revolutionary piece of work, is if it's still relevant today. And Alan Moore's messages within V for Vendetta are as relevant today as they were in 1988 or any other time before that or any time after that. And this takes place in 1997, even though it's published a decade prior. And Alan Moore, in a way, is predicting what is going to happen to the world and how fascism is going to overtake all liberty. And that's happening today in a lot of ways. So really what Alan Moore was doing was giving the audience a warning of a sign of what's to come, and how one person can make a big difference in a place where oppression is the main motif going on in their society. And the one thing that I found intriguing was the term fate, which is the computer. And I thought about this, and I thought about this computer, and is fate a symbol of AI? Is it a symbol of control, which I personally believe it is? But like fate in this instance is almost like social media in a way, where the computers within the story can see everything and they control everything. And that's basically what the media does to us today. So really, the fascists are controlled by media, and the media controls them, and then they want to control the media through controlling other people. So it's almost like a double-edged sword in a way. And I find that really intriguing. And that's, again, a lot of symbolism that Alan Moore uses that can be reigning true today. And the other thing that really interested me was, I'm just looking at my notes here, was how V ends up getting access to it, right? And he ends up going into the propaganda building and saying to everybody that this needs to change. And this is where speech comes into play, and how the power of speech can influence anybody. Because in a way, this form of fascism that Alan Moore is discussing is looking at speech through hierarchy, through fear, and through fear of control. Whereas V, as an anarchist and as a rebel in a way, forming a rebellion, is telling everybody, no, you are controlled, and look at the way that London is falling apart right now and all of the authoritative power within it. You need to change it, and we need to change it now. And that is how speech is very powerful. That somebody just one person can have all that control to hack the media and show everybody all around him. And the movie does this perfectly, where you can see all the screens and everybody around London looking and paying attention and fixating themselves on V discussing what needs to change in society. And this sways a lot of people. And this is a rhetorical piece that works masterfully. And Alan Moore, doing this is a way to show how control is not just in numbers, but how control is through speech and your delivery and what message you are trying to send to everybody and not just one particular target audience. So that was very intriguing to me. And the other thing I wanted to mention too was a little bit of Evie and Gordon's relationship. Again, I think the movie portrays the relationship a bit differently. Gordon still ends up getting killed in a similar way. But the one thing that really was different was Gordon's intentions. And what I mean by that is in the book, Gordon ends up telling Evie that, he's got to clean up her room, and he cleans up her room, but he's got to fill it, right? And then when he fills that room, he says, well, there's room in bed with me. But then in the movie, Gordon is portrayed more as somebody that is not heterosexual. And so I wonder what the difference was there to make that change, because I still think both of them worked masterfully. I just wonder, from a curious point of view, why that was changed, because I think Alan Moore described the scene perfectly, and I also think the movie described it perfectly. And I know that Alan Moore is very critical on films made on his stories. But again, objectively, I like them both. So one of the other things too that was interesting to me was Evie kind of goes full gangster mode. And after Gordon dies, it's almost like she's trying to find some renewal, and she's going to go and shoot her way through her own troubles. And this is almost like a temporary therapeutic release to go and find that impulse to go kill or to harm, to feel like you're going to get even. And the part that really caught my attention was how she used this anger to turn it into her own fear. She manipulated her own anger into her own fear. And it wasn't even a flight or fight situation, because she went from angry to fearful after she's abducted and placed into jail. Jail, I put that in quotes. And when she finds that letter from Valerie, that was also a scene where you can visualize how oppressive society is, because it's funny because the movie makes Gordon homosexual, but then Valerie is also lesbian, and she talks about her struggles in these letters, and this makes Evie weep because there's a symbol of hope there, and she this is her fortitude to go forward. And it's really, really ironic, because when she eventually gets out, V just tells her that this was a test, and she's really angry. And she's angry because she went through all this hell and her head is shaved, and V tells her, you need to lose your fear. And that's a main message in this book, is what happens when you have nothing to lose because of your society. You have to lose that fear, because the fear of confinement is what's going to make you stay confined anyway. But if you lose that fear, you can help change things going forward. And it seems like V, maybe at one time, due to being maybe at Larkhill and tortured, was in perpetual fear, and then eventually he lost that fear, and that fear turned into a philosophy and ideology of anarchy and being an anarchist to create that reform that he's looking for. And I think he's trying to teach Evie that in this instance, where he keeps telling her, you need to lose this fear, because people fear what they don't understand, which is why fascism is taking over. And that's a big thing in society even today, is people fear what they don't understand, and they fear being confined because people that are in authoritative positions have more control to censor what they're saying or to make them not say anything at all. And Evie is finding her agency throughout V's test trial of imprisoning her. And she ends up kind of losing her fear after this a bit more, and then finally she starts to fathom why V did what he did, and this makes her almost like an anarchist, similar to him. And that's power. That is power in the sense that you can take something and you can control it, but then you're controlling somebody by showing them, hey, This is what control looks like. But you don't need to be a part of this control because you can control who you are and control your destiny. And that's what V does. Even though he ends up dying in the end, V lives a life where he is in control of who he is based on his circumstances and leaves a legacy of how reform can create a society where you can be more democratic and have more democracy and let people have a mind of their own, because the world cannot run, or sorry, England that is cannot run off of this unsustainable fascist government that is making the rounds, in the sense that they are making other people submit. And V is that one entity that does not submit. It almost reminds me of the Crow in a way, and the motivations for vengeance are a bit different, but it reminds me of the Crow in the sense that there is one person who has lost everything. And when you lose everything, you become a person with everything to gain. And when you lose everything, you want to exact that vengeance, but not just physically, but internally, for yourself and for your soul. And V's soul might look corrupted on the outside, on the exterior, but in the inside, his soul is very fulfilled because he was able to create a change that no one else had been able to do in this dystopian fascist England. So I think that was a very interesting aspect of this. And maybe it was through trauma. Maybe it was through being tortured at Larkhill, like I mentioned earlier. But I think if we're looking at this from the perspective of trauma, I think it's a very realistic depiction, because people can be trauma motivated, and that trauma can manifest into redemption, vengeance, retribution, whatever you want to call it. But I think for this guy right here, I don't think it's necessarily just vengeance. I think it's self-redemption. I think he views his actions more as a positive connotation than he does for just killing for no reason. There's a belief within V, and then eventually in Evie, that they're doing this not just for themselves, but they're doing it for everybody else, for the sake of their own country and for the fate of their own country. Hence, also the wordplay on computer fate, again, that I mentioned earlier. But this was just my take on it. This was my take on the story. A little more symbolic, I think, maybe. But I think this could even be taught in schools. Maybe it should, because I think it teaches you a lot about the real world and how the real world could end up, or maybe had been before, in wartime, which it was. So it's teaching you history, and it's teaching you about the future. And it's teaching you, for lack of a better term, how a social dilemma, if you have seen that documentary, can influence the perceptions of everyone. So let me know what you guys think of V for Vendetta. Let me know what you think of my analysis. This was, again, a bit different, but this is how I viewed the book. Again, like, share, comment, and subscribe. All comments are appreciated, and most of all, subscriptions are appreciated. So hit the subscribe button and let me know what you think, and let me know what you want to see going forward. I am free to analyze more of these, and I read comics all the time. So if you have a comic that you think I should read, let me know, and I will get back to you soon.